Abdul Kwezob is an educational channel dedicated to helping quantity surveying students to understand what construction measurement is all about. And then in our today's video, we're going to be talking about how to take off for fillings to make up level. And then when I say fillings to make up level, that is where we have hardcore fillings, we have laterite fillings. And then after that, we're also going to be talking about how to take off for fabric mesh, which can also be referred to as wire mesh. And then we're also going to be talking about damp-proof membrane. Now, before we move into the taking off, let's quickly see the pictures of those items, what they are really. When you talk about this hardcore, these are broken rocks, just like the way you can see it there. That's a picture of what hardcore. So, then we also have laterite. The laterite, that's more like red sand. So these are the things they use to fill to make up level. And then we're also going to be talking about fabric mesh and then damp-proof membrane. Fabric mesh is more like reinforcement, but though it's not actually reinforcement, but it's an iron. So I don't really know if I will tag it under reinforcement or not. So just like the way you're seeing it here, that is fabric mesh, or you can also call it wire mesh. And then we also have what? DPM, damp-proof membrane. This damp-proof membrane is expected to prevent the penetration of water into the structure. So keep watching and don't screw. Let's do this taking off together for better understanding. So, alright guys, we are still going to be using this same plan to do the taking off for the hardcore fillings, the laterite fillings, and every other item there. And then looking at this plan now, when you talk about hardcore filling is expected to be done in every of the apartments separately. Now, just take a look at this plan here. We actually have our ante room here. We have the master living room. We have the passage. We have the master room. We have the bedroom. So when it comes to hardcore filling, you are expected to take care of the hardcore fillings in every of the apartments, just like the way you have it displayed on your screen. Now, looking at that picture before you, you're going to notice that the hardcore fillings are actually done in every of the apartments separately. So you don't really need to merge everything together. Now, in this our floor plan now, we're going to be working on just 3 of the apartments. So we're going to be picking ante room, master living room, and then passage. So these are the 3 apartments we're going to be working on. So after this, you can actually go ahead to practice the remaining one yourself. Now, in this our hardcore filling, it is measured in cubic meter. That is one of the things you need to know. The unit of measurement there is cubic meter. And then when you talk about cubic meter, that is where the length, the width, and the depth are needed. So if we are starting with this ante room now, automatically we need the length of this ante room, which is from this point down to this point. And then the dimension there is 4.520 in meter. And then the width here is what? From this point also to this point. And then the value there, or the dimension there, is 3.82. Now, from this apartment, we've actually gotten the length and then the width. So the thickness of our hardcore filling now is going to be 300 mm. That is what we're going to use as the thickness of our hardcore. And then this 300 mm, note that the 300 mm is actually in millimeter. So before you make use of it, you'd have to convert it to meter. And then how do you do that? You just say 300 divide it by 1000. So whatever you have, it is actually in meter. Now let's quickly look at it here. We said hardcore. So now, the length now, let's start with the ante room. The length of our ante room here is 4.52. So you're going to do the booking 4.52. So the length here is 4.52. Then why the width of this ante room is what? 3.82. So you're going to bring that here, 3.82. Then don't forget that the thickness of our hardcore filling is set to be what? 0.30. How? Because you're going to say 300 mm, you divide it by 1000, that's going to give you 0.30 in meter. So this is actually in meter. So you would have to work out everything to be in meter. And then now from here, you're going to multiply 4.52 by 3.82 by 0.30. And then when you do that, you're going to have 5.18. Now in our ante room, we have what? 5 point. This is ante room. So in our ante room, we have 5.18 cubic meter of what? Hardcore filling. So we are done with this ante room here. So the next thing now is that we'll now go for the passage. Now taking the length of this passage, which is also from this point down to this point, which is what? 5.330 in meter. So you're going to have 5.33. And then what's the width? The width is from this point down to this point. That's the width of the passage, which is what? 2.40. So you're going to have 2.40. Then the thickness of the hardcore remains constant until you are done with all of the apartments. So you're going to be using 0.30 as the thickness of the hardcore in every of the apartments you're working on. Then when you do that, you're going to have 5.33, multiply it by 2.40, then you also multiply it by 0.30. And then when you do that, you're going to have 3.84. And then this is our what? This is our passage. Now, in our passage, we have total of what? 3.84 cubic meter of what? Hardcore fillings. And then after that, mind you that we said we're going to be touching ante room, passage, and then master living room. So now to the master living room here, the length of our master living room is from this point down to this point here, and then that is 4.495. So 4.495, approximately that's going to be 4.5. So we are moving this 9 to this 4. That is, we are approximating to this 4. So that's going to give us 4.50. So we have what? 4.50. That's the length of this master living room from this point down to this point here. Then why the width is from here to here, which is 4.125. 4.125. Since the value we are having here is up to 5, so we are going to approximate it, and that will become what? 4.13. So that's going to give us 4.13 as the width of that master living room. So your thickness remains constant, which is what? 0.30. And then when you multiply that together, now you're going to say 4.50 multiplied by 4.13 multiplied by 0.30. And then when you do that, you're going to have 5.58. And then this is what? This is our master living room. This is our master living room. Let's just represent it with LR. Master living room. So this is what you're going to be doing in every of the apartments. Now we are done with the ante room, we are done with the passage, and then the master living room. So you're going to be applying same procedure in every of the apartment. So one thing you need to just take note of is that hardcore fillings are done in every of the apartments separately. Then after the hardcore filling, let's quickly talk about laterite. We have laterite filling, and then this laterite filling is just like that's more like red sand, just like we said the other time. Now this laterite filling also is actually measured in cubic meter as well, and then it is also done in every of the apartments, just like the hardcore. So I usually say hardcore is equal to laterite. Why? Because the both items are expected to be done in every of the apartment, just like the way you also have it displayed on your screen. Now looking at that now from the screen, you're also going to notice that what? The laterite are actually done in every of the apartments separately. You're not merging everything together. If you're working on master living room, you're going to make sure that you find out the cubic meter of laterite filling in that bedroom. If you're talking about kitchen, you're also going to look for the cubic meter of laterite in that kitchen. So just like what we have just done in hardcore filling. So in laterite filling now, you're also going to be taking care of every of the apartment also separately. And then in that case, that's still going to be, now starting with our ante room again, where the length is 4.52. So we have 4.52. And then we have the width to be 3.82. And then here now we're going to be using 0.15 as the thickness of our laterite filling. Though it's just an assumption, the thickness can actually change. It varies. So, but in this case, we are using 0.15. So, regardless of what you're going to be using as the thickness of your laterite, just have it in mind that you're going to be using that same thickness in every of the apartments. So in our case here, we're using 0.15 meter as the thickness of our hardcore filling. So 4.52, you multiply it by 3.82, you multiply it by 0.15, that's going to give us 2.59. 2.59. So this is the volume we have in our ante room. This is our ante room. And then we're also going to be talking about the passage again. In our passage, we have 5.33. That's the length. And then the width is 2.40. Then you have 0.15, which is the thickness of the laterite we're using there. And then when you multiply them together, 5.33 multiplied by 2.4 multiplied by 0.15. When you do that, you're going to have 1.92. So we are also done with the passage. So now down to the master living room. The length of the master living room is 4.50, and then we have the width to be 4.13, and then the thickness is going to be 0.15 also. Don't forget that you're going to be using the same thickness in every of the apartment. And then now when you multiply 4.50, you multiply it by 4.13, you also multiply it by 0.15, which is the thickness, right? So when you multiply them together, that's going to give you 2.79. So now this is the volume of our laterite in our master living room, LR living room. So this is how the hardcore fillings and the laterite fillings are expected to be done. So after you must have done for all of the apartments, just like the way we have it here. Let's say you are done with this ante room, the master living room, the kitchen, the lobby, and all of that. At the end of it, you now sum up everything together, sum all of the values together. You sum this plus this plus this plus the remaining ones, so you can have the actual volume of the laterite fillings that is needed to execute that particular project. Likewise, in the case of hardcore filling also, after you must have taken care of every of the apartments separately, then you're also going to add up all of these values together. This plus this plus this, and then plus the remaining ones. Then you add up everything together so that you can also have the exact volume of hardcore filling needed to execute that particular project. So the next item we're going to talk about here is DPM, which is damp-proof membrane. And then like we said the right time, that damp-proof membrane, that is a polythene leather needed to be spread around the building so that it will help to prevent the penetration of water into the building, just like the way you also have it displayed on your screen. Now this is a damp-proof membrane. This is what we refer to as DPM. So you are expected to lay this all over the place so as to prevent the penetration of water into the walls, at least so as to also prevent dampness, peeling of plastering and painting. Because when you allow the penetration of water into your building, those are the things that must surely come up. It causes peeling of plastering, peeling of painting, and then all of that. So that is why the DPM is very, very important. Now this DPM, what is the unit of measurement of this DPM? The unit of measurement there is square meter. So it is measured in square meter. And then when you talk about square meter, that is where we need just the length and the width of the whole building. Now this is a floor plan here. Now we need the total length. We need the total length from this point, from the beginning here, down to this point here. That is total length of the building. And then we also need the width, which is going to be from here down to this place here. There's actually a setback, so it's not stopping here, but rather it's stopping here because of this one that we have outside. So the total width is going to be from here to here. So you just multiply the total length by the total width to give you the area of your DPM. And then, but if you look at this plan now, you're going to realize that it is not actually in a regular shape. We have recess here. You can see there are recesses here. So that will now make us to do the deduction of all of these recesses. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to pick up the total length of this plan, multiply it by the total width. Then after you must have gotten that value, then you begin to find out, the area of this recess, the area of this recess, and also the area of this recess. Then, so you can deduct it from it, so as to get the exact square meter of your DPM. Now let's quickly look at this. We said we have our DPM. The length of our building here is actually 15.225. This is it, 15.225. Then why the width? The width is 11.420. So now let's quickly work it out. We said the DPM here, the length is 15.225. So approximately that's going to give us 15.23. And then we have the width to be what? 11.42. So we're going to have 11.42. Remember, I said it is measured in square meters, so we only need the length and the width of the whole plan. So now when you multiply this 15.23 by 11.42, you're going to have 173.93. Now what you're having here is what? 173.93. But this is not actually the total square meter of your DPM here. Why? Because there are recesses here. So all of these areas will not be covered with DPM. Neither are you going to cover this place with DPM, neither are you going to cover this place with DPM. But your first taking off has to cover the whole place. Then after then, you begin to find the area of this recess. Find the area, then you deduct it from it. So that's what's going to happen. Then after you must have, looked out for the areas of those recesses, then you now deduct it from this actual value, so as to get the exact square meter of your DPM that is needed. And then don't forget to follow us for more videos. In our next video, we're going to be explaining, or we're going to be showing ourselves how to deduct, how to find out the area of these recesses and then deduct it from the total square meter that we've got in here, so as to get the exact square meter of DPM that is needed. That is for the DPM. And then likewise, after DPM here, we also talked about fabric mesh, which is the wire mesh. And then this fabric mesh is also measured in square meter. And then the fabric mesh, like I showed you the other time, it is measured in square meter, and then it is expected to be spread round the whole building also. So it is measured in square meter, just like the way you also have it displayed on your screen. Now, if you look at this building closely, you're going to realize that the fabric mesh or the wire mesh is actually spread around the building. So it is just like DPM is equal to fabric mesh. So whatever the value you have in your DPM, that is the same value you're going to be having for your fabric mesh. So in that case, there is no need of us doing the fabric mesh separately. So all we're going to do here is just to say DPM slash wire mesh. Either you call it wire mesh or refer to it as fabric mesh. So whichever one, you are correct. So whatever you have for your DPM is the same thing you're going to be using for your wire mesh. So in the case of our DPM, we've looked out for the total square meter to be 173.93, but we are going to be deducting the areas of these recesses. That same thing is going to be applied in our fabric mesh or wire mesh. So if you know you have not subscribed to our YouTube channel, kindly hit the subscribe button below to follow for more videos, and then don't forget to share, comment, and like. See you in our next episode.